probably about 3 weeks ago. Let me see. Yeah, maybe 3 weeks ago. I went out to southern Wyoming to Salt Wells, the HMA, which is where Boo is from. And Boo is the only Mustang I have photos of when she was in the wild. And I found the photographer and I reached out to her when I was in Wyoming for like a private lesson. And I was like, hey, I'm not too far away. I was just wondering if by some chance maybe you could take me out to see the horses. And it was like super last minute, so I was really surprised when she said yes. It was really cool. Not only seeing them, but also hearing her take on everything with Mustangs, from the roundups to like PZP or fertility control, some sort of fertility control, to the ranchers and just all of it. About halfway through our drive, I was like, oh shoot, I really wish I was recording. Like, this is something that I wish everyone would hear. There's so many like new facts that I learned from her, and it was just really exciting for me. I did record a little bit out the window when we were driving, so you can hear a little bit about what we were talking about, but I did want to get a like hopefully clear answers, so we just did a Zoom call. I don't know if the quality is that great, so I'll probably put some clips and videos over it, but hopefully it recorded all of the audio and some of the video, I guess. I was really excited to share this with you all. I hope you enjoy this video and learn something new, and this is probably going to be the video that I will reference people to if they comment something about all horses should be wild and free and something bashing BLM. I'm going to be on the call with Tonya Triplet, and she has been following the Salt Wells HMA and photographing wild horses for quite a few years now. She knows a lot about them. She knows a lot of the photographers that also go out and take pictures of them. Loves these horses like directly in the wild more than these guys. Like, I mean, they go out of their way and drive like pretty darn far to get to them, to just take pictures of them and just enjoy the sight of them, and they really love these Mustangs.
There we go.
There.
Now it's going.
Awesome. How long have you been following them for, like the Salt Wells HMA?
I've been going out since 2015.
Okay, awesome. So about 5 years. So since you're like able to see them firsthand, what are your thoughts on the roundups? Should they be happening? Are they needed? How much is the AML like necessary for these herd areas? Like, what do you see firsthand?
Okay, a lot. They're definitely needed. In 4 years, they can double and triple in size and in population anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's absolutely needed, because we can't sustain that many horses and wildlife on these high desert areas without it. There's no natural predators, there's no hunting season, nothing like that, like with the elk and deer and antelope. So they have to be managed by gathers.
Like if there gets to be too many, especially since we're speaking just from like the Salt Wells herd right now, we can't speak for all of them, but when there's too many, do they start to get like emaciated?
Yeah, since it's high desert, our biggest issue is water. And of course, if there's no water, there's not going to be enough grass. So our water holes are starting out right now. They're already starting to dry up, and it's only the end of June, first part of July. And they still have, quite a bit of hot season left to go through. There are some natural springs that have been developed, so they'll keep running, but for the most part, they're going to be traveling, 20, 30 miles a day just to get to water and then back out to where they feed.
I remember one of the things that was really interesting that we talked about was the ranchers, that actually some of the water sources are from them that they put there, right?
Yes, they have to develop the water sources out there. There's a spring. A lot of times springs that are running are just little muddy holes. They're not really anything more than water coming up out of the ground is seeping along. And the ranchers have to develop water for their livestock, whether it's sheep or cattle or whatever. They have to go out and actually make reservoirs and get this water flowing so that they have water for their cows. In
Yeah.
turn, that helps the horses because then the horses have water, and deer and elk and everything else can water there. So it's necessary for them to be
Yeah.
out there.
It just seems like a lot of people, at least that I ran into, always try to make the ranchers out to be like pretty bad. And it seems like it's not that they don't want them there at all. They just want them to be managed, because if they start to overpopulate, there's not going to be any resources for their animals. And it is the land that they're also working with.
Right. I feel like the ranchers are probably a better steward of the land than a lot of people understand, because
Yes.
their livelihood is this livestock, whether it's sheep or cows. So for them to destroy their land that they use to graze their cows on, this doesn't seem at all, responsible or even messy. It doesn't make any sense that they would not take care of the land, the water, the fences, the grass. When there's droughts, they don't go out. They don't to put as many cows out, or they don't go out at all if it's that bad.
Yeah.
But they still have to pay their permits. They still have to pay everything to keep their permit.
And then another thing is it's called PZP, right? When they
Yes,
do like the sterilizing shots with the mares. So that's one option. People are always like, oh, well, why don't they just like capture them and then do that and then release them again? But that wears off after a certain amount of time, right?
Yeah, it'll last 1, maybe 2 years at the most, usually. The problem with that is if they still gather them, they're still gathering them, they're still going to be brought into traps with helicopters and so forth, and then have the shot administered and then sent back out, or be darted, volunteers going out and darting horses. But a lot of HMAs, you can't get close to the horses. They aren't used to people. So that becomes ineffective if you can't get close to the horses, because you have to be fairly close to dart them.
Yeah.
Salt Wells, it would probably work all right. You were there. You saw the horses.
Yeah,
they didn't mind.
Yeah, they're pretty friendly because they're used to people coming by and looking at them and all. But I haven't seen any other HMAs, but I know you've seen a couple, and they're pretty distant.
Yeah, they're a little flighty. They tend to leave as soon as they see humans. So that's not going to work in a lot of places. I know in the Utah herds, they're really flighty. Some of the central Wyoming HMAs have horses that aren't around people, and they're the same way. They just rather leave than stay there and let you even photograph them. So
yeah,
you were out there. You saw our horses. You saw how healthy they look. They're fat and they look good. Their feet are good. That's because they're managed. They're due again to be gathered. They were gathered in 2017, and they took like 1,500 and some odd horses. I think it was 720 something from just Salt Wells.
Yeah.
That were gathered. Our AML is like between, I don't remember what it was exactly, but it's like 200 and something to 300 and I don't know, 20, something like that. It's pretty low. And we're probably that right now.
Yeah.
We're probably well over 900 head of horses. Even though, I mean, our acreage is 1,173,000 acres. And only about 724,000 acres is where the horses actually are. Even though that sounds like a lot, it's high desert. There's not a lot of feed. You saw that. There are not a lot of feed in some of that area.
Yeah.
It's just
like
dirt,
a lot of bushes. And I mean,
brush.
The other thing too is not like they do well, but like there's not really shelter out there. Luckily, Wyoming, at least going now, it was nice. I don't know what it's like in the winter months there, but especially if there was like a large amount of horses out there, there's not much shelter. I can imagine food gets pretty scarce as well.
Yep, that's it does. You can't even get to where we were. You couldn't even get halfway to where we were because
Yeah.
the snow gets so deep you can't drive down those roads. They
Yeah.
drift in. And so the feed gets harder to get to. They'll eat brush and greasewood, which isn't very nutritious for them, but that's what they
Mhm.
do. They also eat their own manure. That's why they'll pile it up the way they do, because it's
Mhm.
easier to get to.
Yeah.
But it's harder for them to get through. I mean, when they come out in spring, when it starts to melt, some of them look fairly thin. They don't, the older horses especially, they won't winter well. They come back in the spring usually, because we usually have a pretty decent spring where they have lots of grass. But
Yeah.
as of right now, the one water hole I took you to down by the highway
Mhm.
is probably a quarter of the way dried up. I mean,
A couple of them were already like pretty dried up when I was there too.
yeah,
It was
yep,
only
they're even
like,
more so now.
but they're able to still look so healthy right now because they're still managed and able to be gathered. And you work with the BLM too, especially during the gathers, because you said they reach out to you guys since you know where they usually like hang out at and where the best
Yeah,
place
they'll
would be.
they'll ask those who go out and know where the horses are and everything. They'll ask, where's a good place to set a trap,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. They kind of count on us because we have good documentation of these horses
Yeah.
and the lineage and that kind of stuff. So it helps them decide which ones should be gathered and which ones should be either left out there or returned back out there.
Yeah.
We have the curly Mustangs, and they're somewhat rare, not extremely rare, but they're not in a lot of places. So those ones are pretty favored over here.
Even when they are gathered in holding, because we went and looked at the, what is it, the Rock Springs, or what is it called, that
Yep, the Rock Springs
Rock
facility. Yep.
Springs, they're all like fat and healthy in there. A lot of people think like the holding, like they're absolutely miserable and they're not taken care of. And of course they have short-term holding, which is the one that we saw, but then there's also long-term, and that's pretty much just big pastures.
Yep, just off-range pastures, just big open, just like they were in the wild, and just get to live the rest of their lives out there until they're gone, and they get fed and they get watched after, and they'll have water and everything the whole time. They have automatic waters in every pen, so they have continually fresh water all the
Mm-hmm.
time, winter, summer, whenever. You saw we were out there fairly late in the morning, and they had plenty of feed still out there. And we had discussed the, spaying and gelding.
Yeah.
And I felt like the spaying is a good option because it's the way it's done now. They would bring the mares in, they would be spayed, and then they would stay in from 7 to 10 days about and be monitored to make sure that everything went well. And then they get to go back out and be free. And the
And
mares no longer have to.
the procedure is even less invasive than like a gelding would be, as far as I understand, right?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. I don't know the exact procedure. I've read it before. I just don't remember exactly what it was. But
Mm-hmm.
it's the risks are way lower than even the gelding. I mean, gelding, they cut them open, remove the testicle, and that's it. They get
Yeah.
left to heal on their own, and they're swelling. They can't exactly cold hose a wild horse,
Yeah.
and so that they just kind of get left until they heal. And
Mm-hmm.
the mares would be monitored and then sent back out. So if I would think if a mare over 10 years old was brought in and was spayed and then sent back out, she'd spend the rest of her life out on the range and not have to worry about being bred over and over again, having to carry a foal or during the foaling
Right.
process, having any in the incidents. The fighting over her would be way less because she's not going to be coming into heat anymore.
Right.
Whereas PZP, the mares still come into heat every
Right.
month and will be repeatedly bred over and over the whole time, which increases, infection and risk of injury.
And that totally, like, that makes sense. I wish that that was an option that more people talked about, because you hear about the PZP, but like, and I heard about it and I was like, oh, that's a good idea. But then I was like, well, it wears off. and if they still don't go into heat, and like it just seemed like less effective than it would be to spay them. And then of course, in addition to like it being way less difficult on the mare once they're spayed, it also would help with the population. They wouldn't be able to reproduce.
Yeah, and then we wouldn't have to have them in holding. They would be able to, live out the rest of their life out in the wild, and just having, a certain age, have them spayed. That way, there's no that's that many less foals out there, because they'll be having babies till they're 20 years old. So they start having them at 2 years old. My mare that I have, her first foal was born at 2. She was 2 years old when she had the first one, and that's rough on them. And then you spend the next 19 years having a foal every single year. It's pretty hard on them. Definitely. Especially if there's intervention. If something happens, they die. They just die.
Yeah.
I mean, I've actually found a skeleton out in Salt Wells of a mare that had died, and she actually hasn't had a foal in her pelvis that she was foaling, and because of complications, they both died.
Oh gosh, that was quite a bit of what we talked about, right?
I don't know.
I know. I wish I actually did record it. When I said that halfway through, I was like, oh, I should just record this, because I know even if we do this, we won't be able to replicate that.
I would always hope that anybody who was against the BLM and against the gathers would actually go to an HMA. Go out for yourself and see it. See where the horses live. See what their feed looks like and what their water sources look like, and see why they have to be managed. It won't sustain them. We're right now, like I said, at triple the AML in Salt Wells alone. We're at over 900 head of horses, and our high end of the AML is 300 and something.
That's definitely a big thing, is going out and seeing it, because I was on the same page, and I already agreed on everything, and I knew the basic facts, but then when I got there and was able to see it in person and talk to someone who's around these horses quite often, compared to the average horse person or even just non-horse person who has their opinions on them, it definitely helped give me a better grasp and perspective on it all. Yeah.
Ranchers aren't bad. BLM's not all bad. Everybody has a part in this, along with the rest of us. Us taking the horses in and training them, you guys doing the EMNs, the rest of us just adopting. That's all part of this. This is what we need to do to keep these horses free on the range. Otherwise, there won't be much hope.
Thank you for doing this, and now hopefully I'll be able to inform quite a few other people on some more insights on the HMAs and the roundups and why it's necessary.
BLM leases, and the ranchers are essentially the ones that maintain fences and roads, and they're the ones that develop the springs, the water holes.
Yeah.
If you don't have the rancher, a lot of these horses wouldn't have water.
Yeah.
At all.
Wow. See, and that's stuff that you need to be here and talk to the people that are here, because I didn't even know that. Someone yawning.